Good morning. This is the Innovation Conversation. How you doing, Tom? Good to see you.
Doing great, Kevin. Good to see you too. Good morning.
Yeah. I love it's new artwork behind you. Step out of the way a little bit so people can see it.
Pretty cool, huh?
It's totally cool.
Yeah.
It's obviously a guitar. Is it somebody specific?
No, it's just an up close of a guitar. Kind of cool.
It's very cool.
Oh, it was a cool piece. And yeah, I changed my angle of orientation here in my Arizona office. Usually you'd see my windows,
Yeah.
but I wanted to just turn it here. It's better, more consistent lighting. Although the light over me is out, so it's going to be replaced. It's going to be really nice. But then it was just all plain white back there, so that was no bueno.
No,
So
no,
thought that
it's
was
totally,
fun.
totally cool.
Yeah, thank you.
So I really wanted to talk this week about Marc Lore. It's Marc Lore. It's not Lore, right? Lore,
Correct.
right? And who I have occasionally been dismissive of over the years, although less so frequently, because it's easy. It's so easy to be a dismissive of a billionaire, and I was really fascinated. I mean, the story came out last week that he was buying Grubhub for basically $100 million in cash and $550 million in assumed debt, which was interesting. But then you add to that he already acquired Blue Apron
Yep.
for $103 million, and he's got Wonder, which is basically this ghost kitchen business.
Hmm.
Um, and when you look at the pieces and how they could fit together, I think he's potentially assembling something really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked over the years, and anybody in our industry knows how, solving the meal problem is, how important solving the meal problem is for our customers, right? It's one of the biggest challenges that households have, individuals have. So often in late afternoon, we're asking ourselves what's for dinner tonight. And there's just a big opportunity in that. He's approaching this. I think he calls it a super app for food or super app for meals. Um, I think there's real value in that. It's potentially a massive space. It's been solved to some degree from their grocery business, of course, from some degree, of course, from restaurants, and increasingly over the last, handful of years from these fast delivery services. Um, but they all are kind of missing something.
Yeah.
And not to say this is gonna hit all the elements, but the idea that you have an app in your pocket that can solve, in a quality way, your meal need uh, relatively quickly, um, in a way that is, different than just grabbing product from your local restaurant, getting it home to your house. It's probably not as warm and fresh as it could be. And, so the idea of having it through this new concept, this new method of preparation, these new, options, I think it's potentially pretty interesting. And it definitely sets itself up well to be a standalone business as well as a business that can partner with others.
Well, yeah, I mean, because it's on the first glimpse, you might say, okay, this is going to be competitive with the traditional supermarket business, but it could be really highly complementary. You can imagine, I mean, listen, you can imagine if Walmart
Hmm.
wanted to really make a real play in this area, that they could partner with and maybe eventually acquire a company like this, because they're going to have, three legs of the stool, which is really important to have.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's some retailers that have been very good at addressing that culinary need, that mealtime need, that meal solution need, on their own through prepared meals, in-store restaurants and cafes, and different in-store offerings, and then consumer instruction, recipes, those kinds of things. There's lots of ways to solve it. I think that um, there's probably some retailers that outsourcing, a significant portion of that to Wonder might not be on brand for them.
Right.
But there's probably a whole bunch that it is, because I'd say more retailers than not, don't do it well. And all those retailers that aren't doing it well today, what a potentially, tremendous partnership opportunity when you can have that, high quality, highly efficient, highly effective partner, that's a brand within your brand, could potentially be really valuable to lots of retailers.
I mean, I've always drawn the line. There are food retailers who really are in the food business, but there's a lot of food retailers who really aren't in the food business. They're in the
Right.
logistics business, they're in the jar business, they're in the back, they're not really committed to food. And for that, and that's most food retailers in this country, I would
Yeah.
argue. For them, this could be a real powerful tool that would allow them to kind of expand their footprint in a really smart way.
Yeah, I think it could. I mean, as the world changes, as technology advances, as AI advances, as how you as a customer or how you as a retailer can engage your customers, and then you're determining what is that value proposition I'm providing for my customers. And, an element could be making this service available to them, within the context of their larger relationship with you. And that could potentially be, for some retailers, be really valuable.
Interesting. I wonder if there are other pieces out there that, I mean, what essentially he's done is he's buying distressed assets, right? I mean, when you look, I mean, Grubhub 3 years ago, when it was bought by that German company, they valued it at $7 billion.
Yeah. So
And he
114.
got the whole thing for less than 700 million, including
Yeah.
debt, right?
Yeah.
Blue Apron at one point had a $2 billion valuation. He got it for $103 million. So he's taking these distressed assets, and I can imagine that there may be other assets out there that could start to complete the
Yeah.
puzzle, right? That he would pick up, and suddenly, it's the whole thing about the whole is going to be actually greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, I think so. And a lot of these assets, I mean, Blue Apron, for example, they kind of ran into, the subscription fatigue, issue,
Right.
where, they weren't providing enough new and renewed value to their customers on an ongoing basis to validate the continued subscription fees for it, right? And that's hard to do. Like, in these subscription businesses, you got to keep adding new value. You got to keep it exciting. It gets harder. It's harder to do. You're going to have some natural, attrition, but that really got them over time, and it was an expensive business to run as well. So still real potential there, but as a standalone business, maybe tougher. But as those types of meal kit solutions inside of the value proposition of Wonder could make a ton of sense. So I mean, what a great, what a steal to be able to get it as a distressed asset, that works well in the business model.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. And listen, I mean, um, he has a reputation. Marc Lore has a reputation, right? He does this. And he creates things. Now, listen, he may create something that's going to be he'll be able to establish it's worth it, $4 or $5 or $6 billion, and then he'll sell it to somebody and move on to something else. And while, I don't think, I mean, clearly Jet did not remain a viable business proposition, even after being acquired by
Mhm.
Walmart. I mean, I think you can argue that he really he injected something that Walmart really needed when he joined that company. And Doug McMillon, the CEO, was willing to kind of take it, right? I mean, it required both pieces. But I mean, Walmart's a different company now than before he joined it, and I think he gets a lot of the credit for that.
Yeah, he totally does. And yeah, was Jet's assets really worth 3.5 billion or whatever it was, at the time? Clearly based on the business model itself and what it was producing, that math didn't seem to work really well. But the potential of that business in a bigger company like Walmart alone was probably worth the purchase. But then the real benefit of injecting all of that DNA into the company, like that's paid itself off way, many times over. I mean, Walmart's, like you said, completely transformed company. In this regard, its digital profile, its digital prowess, it's true omni-channel presentation to the customer and benefit to the customer, miles ahead of where it was, and probably miles ahead of where it would have been had they not made that purchase. So yeah, maybe Wonder can become that that kind of transformational purchase for the next acquirer. Although my guess is that that's not the company that Mark and his team are building now. They're trying to build a company that will succeed on its own, will grow. They've talked about aspirations of an IPO down the road, if the markets so cooperate. Certainly potentially a global business. So it does seem to have, some good potential. Ton of execution risk and market risk in front of it.
Right.
But that's nothing to shy away from when you're Marc Lore.
Well, and the other thing, and I think this is always in some ways the bottom line for our audience, right? Which is that regardless of whether you end up partnering with Wonder and all its various components, the notion of connecting the dots, and we've used that phrase to talk about what Amazon seems to be trying to do at the
Yep.
the notion of kind of connecting the dots when you consider customer needs and customer, mindset is really, really important, right? I mean, it's
100%.
right. You got to figure out what are the different places where, and eliminating the friction between those things and doing it in a way that creates a more holistic offering that addresses a variety of needs and desires.
100%. It is hard though to have the dots connected, from the start, right? Lots of
Yeah.
times you have to, that's one of the best ways to innovate. And I'd encourage anybody in our audience to innovate that way, is to separate, that innovation, do it in a contained environment where you can, intensely, or not intensely, expressly invest in it, expressly build it, and expressly measure it.
Right.
And gather that customer feedback along the way. That's really, really valuable. But you can't scale all those experiments separately. And that's where it really does, it really does, behoove the retailer, and talking about Amazon or Wonder or others, you have to connect the dots for your customer. You can't ultimately ask them, to be the connector.
Right.
Make it easy for them,
Yeah.
because if they have to connect the dots, that's way too much friction. But don't be afraid to have some scattered dots,
Right.
on the way up. But then, definitely bring it together for them.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine at some level, and you know so much more about this than I do, it will be easier to make that work if you're bringing together distressed assets. It's sort of easier to break down the walls because the walls are sort of crumbling on their own
Oh,
anyway,
absolutely.
right? But within companies where you're doing, which you have a lot of a bunch of different innovations going on. Whoever is sort of in charge of that, right? Those different tests probably has to be, sort of, has to have their finger in the wind to know when the precise moment is to start lowering the barriers, right?
Totally.
It's so much of it is timing. So
Yeah.
you're right. Or to use another metaphor, you got to time the wave right. So it doesn't.
Yeah, you do have to time the wave right. And I don't think anybody's necessarily demonstrated that they're really good at that.
Right.
I think we're seeing Amazon trying to pull it together, but we've been asking them to do that for a while.
Right.
But maybe it is the right time for them, and maybe it will be wildly successful, or maybe they did miss the boat. That they did
Yeah.
lose too many customers along the way. We don't know. We'll learn that.
Right.
But yeah, there's some real art in getting that right. But all the while though, if you truly are customer centric, you'll know when the right time is.
Well, listen, as long as we've been doing an innovation conversation, we've talked about aspirational stuff, right? It's all hard. It's not
Yeah,
easy, right? But it's really only worth aspiring to do the hard stuff, right?
exactly.
It's not worth aspiring to
No.
do the easy stuff. That's no
Yeah.
fun.
Well, if you're not aspirational, you're gonna become
Right.
completely irrelevant to your customers over time. Speaking of aspirational,
Yes.
I aspire to do this with you many times more in the future. Really looking forward to, well, first of all, congratulations on finally making the move that I know you've been looking forward to or contemplating for quite some time. I guess the big 7-0 will do that to you. And now you're probably looking out, you've only got another 10 or 15 years of your career left.
Well, yeah, and it is. Listen, it is aspirational. It, in a lot of ways. I'm not going to pretend I'm not a little apprehensive because I've been doing
I
this for so
bet.
long, right? It's like, who am I if I'm not the content guy? Which is why I'm not giving up. That I'm not. I'm going to continue to do it, and I'm thrilled that innovation conversation once or twice a month will continue to
Oh
be part
yeah.
of the mix because it's one of the really fun things that I do on a regular basis. And I think, I hope the audience will continue to come along for the ride, and maybe they'll be happy only getting me 3 times a week.
Well, I don't know about that, but yeah, I mean, I think it's you'll figure out the right tempo, the right you know uh volume and nature of stories. I think I think we'll all together we'll all figure it out, and
Yeah,
we all need to be able to change with you.
yeah,
I know that the community is just loved this, and it's been such an important part of our day, for so many years now. um but when you go away, we miss you. You'll go on your trips, and we'll miss you. But you're always ready to jump on a story, if it's big and important. And I imagine you'll still feel
yeah,
compelled to do that. You'll there'll be lots of, I think, just I'm really looking forward to doing these. Maybe not as regimented as every other Wednesday, to publish, but but if we do that, that's great too. Like, I'm up for anything, and whatever the community is up for would be great. I love it.
yeah.
I hope other people enjoy it, and yeah, and who knows what we'll be reporting on in these coming years. Like, this industry is not getting any less interesting, that's for sure.
That is true. Well, on that note, I will say happy Thanksgiving, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Happy Thanksgiving to you too, and everyone out there.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.